So,
vamos ver o sistema dinâmico de
another thing
missões.
that I
Ó.
wanted to touch on
Já
is
tá mais
the dynamic mission
interessante.
system. And this is actually one of the more important pieces of gameplay tech that's going to debut next year. But before I get into that, it would make sense to talk a bit about where we currently stand and some of the limitations that we currently face. So right now, all of the mission content that we have within the game is completely static. There's no way for the designers to control how many of a given mission is available at a given location.
Ele está falando que, por enquanto, ó, o sistema de missões é completamente estático. Ó. A equipe de design não tem condições de criar missões dinamicamente, por enquanto.
Now, the designers have, valiantly attempted to circumvent some of these limitations as best they could, but the reality is that they've just been missing a critical piece of the puzzle. And so the dynamic mission system is intended to change all of that, to provide a direct link to the economy so that things can be.
É por isso que eles estão tentando criar um sistema dinâmico de missões, ó, que ele seja linkado diretamente com o sistema de economia. Seja bem-vindo, Kaguru. Valeu pelo follow, cara.
I want to find one more term that's going to occasionally pop up, and that you have probably heard quite a few times just in various chats on the website. Environmental mission scenarios are created via subsumption, very much like normal missions. One key difference, though, is that they often don't have explicit objectives that you're intended to accomplish. They're used to basically create the world that should just be going on around you, but which we don't actually construct unless you're there to actually see it. These scenarios are instantiated via probability volumes, which are basically regions of space that define the likelihood of encountering different things. And it's within these volumes that the probabilistic NPCs I mentioned earlier exist, if you really want to call it that.
Essa aqui é bem
as a player makes their
técnica
way
mesmo.
through a probability volume, it queries a library of mission content to determine what the player should see, and then it actually creates it.
Para os caras conseguirem fazer esse sistema de emissão dinâmica, os caras têm que ter uma biblioteca de coisas que podem ser feitas para que elas sejam geradas de forma fácil pelo sistema.
Basically, coalesce into reality, and you can actually see it. That's where we take things, out of the land of probabilities, which we do because it's so much more efficient. Like I was saying earlier, and at that point we actually create real NPCs on a real server which you can interact with.
Sim, o sistema de missões dinâmicas é justamente para dar mais variedade no universo do game, né?
Slightly smaller chance of encountering a pirate. So as you fly around that area, then you'll occasionally see a cargo freighter and a bit less frequently a pirate. And I mentioned earlier that there were some significant negatives, even if we were to try to simulate everything at a complete level. So one of the benefits of this approach that we're doing, besides being a really effective optimization, is that it allows us to highlight what I'd call the interesting moments. If you think about how large space is and how infrequently you actually run into things, the odds that you'd ever run into a cargo freighter right as a pirate was closing on them, or just as the pirate had disabled them and had docked to their ship and was just about to begin a breaching operation, the odds of you coming upon that at that particular moment would be infinitesimally small. But it's actually those moments that are sometimes the most interesting from a gameplay perspective. And so what we get with this system, besides all the optimization, is really
Valeu pelo follow, Economia. Seja bem-vindo, cara.
Predisposition towards a higher than normal frequency of that type of thing happening.
Ele está falando que, por exemplo,
so getting back on track a little bit,
esse sistema de dinamismo, ele traz alguns contras, como por exemplo, o tamanho do universo ele é tão grande que dificilmente tu vai dar o acaso de encontrar um cargo com um pirata atacando ele e tudo isso acontecer de forma ocasional, entendeu? Mas são esses momentos que são legais, então eles estão tentando achar uma maneira de fazer que tudo isso funcione de uma forma mais dinâmica,
where they're actually needed, where there's a legitimate function that the economy has determined needs to be performed, and that the prices offered will be justified by what's currently happening within the world. So the dynamic mission system is also going to allow for a lot more intelligent customization of missions, which in turn is going to equate to a lot more variety. And this won't just be the case for the missions that you explicitly accept. It'll also carry over to environmental mission scenarios. So right now, when a probability volume instantiates one of these environmental mission scenarios, the content is totally fixed. There's no way to customize anything based upon the current situation at that particular moment. With this system, though, we'll be able to start doing things like dictating the type and quantity of cargo, whether a cargo freighter should have escorts, a ship's current level of damage, and all sorts of other things based upon what makes sense in that area.
Cara, isso aqui vai ser animal, hein?
This is probably kind of an esoteric concept, but to give you a better understanding of why this is a really powerful concept, I'll go into a quick and very simple example. So imagine that there is an asteroid field with a lot of very valuable resources and a distant refinery, and thus there's a lot of back and forth activity. There's basically mining ships that are heading, from the refinery out to the asteroid field, extracting value, and then heading back with the full cargo hold.
Valeu pelo follow, socialista. Seja bem-vindo.
There are also a lot of pirates. So there are a lot of things that you can or that you should be able to infer about this scenario, all of which the dynamic mission system is going to help automatically resolve. So if you were to fly between the asteroid field and the refinery, you'd of course expect to occasionally encounter a miner, sometimes encounter a pirate, and sometimes both. However, if you ran into a miner heading towards the asteroid field, you'd expect that their cargo hold would actually be empty. They were heading there to go stock up. Similarly, if a miner were heading back towards the refinery, you'd expect that their cargo hold would not only be full, but that it would be loaded up with whatever commodities were present within that asteroid.
Eu já explico para vocês o que está acontecendo.
Pirates obviously would logically focus on those miners that had something of value, such that you'd expect miners on the way to the asteroid field to typically be in a completely undamaged state. When they were basically heading in that direction, they had nothing of value. And those that were heading back to the refinery that you encountered would sometimes be much worse off, which would effectively reflect the fact that they may have already tangled with some pirates and just managed to get away. And so if you ran into a scenario where a pirate ship had disabled a freighter, docked with it, and it was getting ready to or already breaching, you'd also expect that the freighter must therefore have cargo, be returning from the field, or else the pirate would have logically tangled with a completely different ship. So the dynamic mission system is going to allow us to customize a lot of this content automatically, so that the things you see are.
Ele deu exemplo ali muito. Ele deu exemplo muito interessante de como o sistema dinâmico de missões ele deve funcionar. Por exemplo, se tu tá numa zona onde tem
So one more big one to hit here, which is mission spoofing. That's another major feature that
se vocês têm tipo uma zona de mineração e ela tá longe de uma refinaria, obviamente vocês vão ter naves indo e vindo dessa área de mineração. Então, o sistema dinâmico de missões ele tem que entender que se existir um pirata ali, o pirata não tem que atacar a nave que está indo para o sistema de mineração, ele tem que atacar a nave que está voltando do sistema. Porque provavelmente, para a lógica, ela vai estar cheia de cargo após ir até o centro de asteroides e carregar para voltar, né, para descarregar na refinaria. Então, o sistema de emissão dinâmica, ela tem que pegar e fazer com que o pirata ataque o cara nesse exato momento, criando assim toda uma outra gama de missões de proteger e escolta para esses tipos de NPCs.
In other words, you may be getting a call from a guy that's far away, and we don't want to once again go to all the effort of creating him until it's really necessary. And so what the system will do is effectively spoof those offers. It will create a little virtual NPC. That NPC
e isso linka justamente com o que ele está falando agora. Esse sistema ele vai fazer com que os NPCs eles comecem a criar as missões de forma dinâmica em tempo real. Então, se por exemplo, se na volta o minerador foi interditado por um pirata, ele vai pedir resgate e aí ele vai criar uma missão de forma dinâmica. E tu vai lá e tem que ajudar ele a escapar daquela situação. Hoje em dia está tudo estático. A equipe de desenvolvimento ela vai colocar uma missão num ponto específico para ela acontecer e tu vai ter que ir lá e terminar ela. Ela é feita à mão, sabe? Não é feita dinamicamente.
And so what we don't want to have is for every player to have 10 service beacons getting fired off and be creating all of creating all those characters, creating all of those ships, executing all that logic when there's no one around to actually see it. So there's one other thing here that I wanted to talk about, which is the focused NPC generation. And basically this applies to players. Well, it applies to two different things. The first thing is actually players with a large price in their head are inevitably going to attract bounty hunters, and they're not all going to be players. These NPCs are handled a bit differently because they have actual purpose, and when they finally run into you, it's not going to be a random encounter, and thus they're not particularly good candidates for the normal random probabilistic distribution within a probability volume. So you can think of them a bit as ghost NPCs that quietly track you around the universe, following any breadcrumbs you're leaving, and doing their very best to find you. Once the system has determined that they've succeeded, they'd arrive on the scene, finally get converted into a real NPC, and engage you just as a player might. This focused NPC generation also plays a role in the creation of NPC service providers. And this is, to some degree, the mirror image of what I discussed a moment ago, but this time it involves the creation of an NPC in response to your requesting a service.
A geração de NPCs ela também vai ser muito interessante. Tu não vai ter NPCs sendo gerados aleatoriamente para ficar te perseguindo o tempo todo. Os NPCs que são gerados pelo game, eles têm um propósito. Por exemplo, ele não vai simplesmente ficar te caçando porque tu é pirata. Se o NPC que ele é bounty hunting, ele vai ir num sistema, procurar para ver quem é que está a prêmio, ele que vai decidir quais cabeças ele quer caçar, no caso, quais são os melhores prêmios, e ele vai atrás de ti de forma dinâmica. Não vai ser um NPC criado exatamente naquele momento para fazer aquela situação específica, sabe?
So the next thing up is the law and order system. We're going to be making a lot of changes to the law and order system over the next year, but before getting into that,
ano que vem vai ter mudanças no sistema criminal do game, ó.
So at the moment, we currently have the concept of a global criminal reputation, which is a bit like a rolling history of your.
Por enquanto a gente tem um sistema global de reputação,
except via time and the actions that you do. We also have a wanted level, and it increases
tem também o nível de procurado, né?
Within range of an operational com array. And it can be removed by hacking a terminal or by getting killed by AI security or a bounty hunter. And lastly, if a bounty hunter takes out such a criminal, you immediately get paid. So there are a number of problems with this system, and we'll get into a little bit of detail.
Ele está comentando que esse sistema atual de sistema de criminalidade tem vários problemas.
Revolve around the concept of these hierarchical jurisdictions, and a jurisdiction is basically just an area that defines its own set of laws, or which adds or extends the laws of its parent.
A ideia é que cada área tem a sua própria jurisdição.
The federal government, Crusader might be considered a state, and Port Olisar could be considered a city. The laws of the UEE would certainly be within, in force within Port Olisar, but Port Olisar might go a bit farther and prohibit the possession of certain substances within its jurisdiction. And each of these jurisdictions are going to maintain their own criminal database, and it will be accessible to all law enforcement, all AI security and bounty hunters that are registered within that jurisdiction. And here's a list of some of the crimes that we've been debating.
A lista de crimes que podem ser cometidos, ó.
Theft would of course just be taking something that
acho que manslaughter,
manslaughter, killing without malice.
Assassino.
A good example of that would be
mineração ilegal,
that's in the
carga
process, they're in
ilícita,
close proximity to a bounty, that they're actually after, and they inadvertently kill someone else. In that case, you can kind of infer that they probably didn't do it intentionally, and thus the penalty should be a lot less than something intentional like murder. But it might involve something like, temporary ejection from the Bounty Hunters Guild, etc. And this is, intended to
até quando tu matar outro player ou outro NPC, vai ter níveis diferentes de criminalidade, ó. Eles vão analisar se tu matou ele de forma intencional ou não. Dependendo da gravidade, eles podem até te excluir de um sistema.
example of a planetary body or moon that you don't own.
Sim, mineração ilegal é quando, por exemplo, tu não solicita a área de mineração e já sai minerando. Sempre que tu achar um ponto de mineração, tu tem que solicitar poder minerar ali, né, entendeu? Smuggling, que acho que é contrabando, assassinato, falsa ID. Acho que falsa ID geralmente é quando tu tá condenado e tenta passar despercebido. E quanto interdiction também. Quanto interdiction é quando tu quebra o control drive do cara no meio do caminho.
False ID would basically equate to you using a kit that allows you to throw off a false signature so that when you're actually scanned by others, you can basically, give them a sense that you might be law-abiding. Quantum interdiction and dampening, those would relate to the illegal creation of a field intended to inhibit quantum travel, which of course is a tactic that's going to be very popular with pirates looking to snare their prey. And each of the laws within these jurisdictions will be able to be associated with a penalty, and this can be anything from as minor as a fine that might elevate to a bounty if you don't pay it on time. It could result in bounties, and there are two different bounties. There's the dead or alive variety, and then there's capture. Capture would typically apply to some of the less serious crimes, smuggling, to where you weren't actually causing bodily injury to someone. Prison duration, how much time you're actually going to serve as a result of this. Banishment, you could be restricted from going into a particular city or zone.
O cara ele pode cometer crimes que podem ser desde os mais graves aos mais tranquilos. Tu vai, dependendo do tipo de penalidade que tu receber, um caçador de recompensa pode ir te buscar e tu pode ser buscado vivo ou morto. Vai ter tempo que tu vai ficar preso e tu pode ser também ser excluído de uma zona. Então, por exemplo, pode ser proibido de chegar em Porta de Sara, por exemplo.
The next up would be the FPS variant, and this requires you to be in close proximity to another character and to have a view of the character's face.
Agora vão ter diferentes tipos de escaneamento também, ó.
More than just try and identify known criminal. They can also try to detect crimes that are still in progress. To that end, ships will be able to be scanned for more than
vai ter scanner de FPS, ó, que massa, ó. Vai ter que chegar bem perto do cara para poder escanear ele, tem que enxergar a face dele para poder escanear.
And this will also be of value to pirates who want to basically know whether or not a freighter has anything that's interesting before they actually move in to engage. Upon verification of the presence of illicit cargo, a bounty would be automatically issued if it didn't already exist, and the security officer would then be cleared to engage as appropriate. And then there would be a still deeper, more time-consuming,
busca por jurisdição, onde o scanner é registrado pela lei da regente daquela área, eu acho.
Cargo. There will be few NPCs and probably few players that are actually going to master that. And
também dá para escanear a identidade do dono da nave, ver a atividade de itens ilícitos que ele fez.
All of these scans are, of course,
dá para rastrear o cargo também.
With more skillful scanners, less likely to be noticed.
O que é isso aqui?
And as with the current system, security forces are spawned via environmental mission scenarios, and thus encounters with them are purely by chance based upon the density of security in that area. And these forces aren't immediately hostile. It's similar to just running
das forças de segurança vai depender muito do tráfego que está em cada área.
Once security has verified that you're a known criminal, then everything changes. You get a pursuit rating, and all of a sudden,
então, por exemplo, assim, tu não vai ser perseguido de uma forma completamente aleatória. Dependendo do tráfego de segurança que tem em uma área, tu pode ser ou não encontrado por eles. Só que se tu for encontrado pelo segurança, aí vai começar a perseguição. Aí o gameplay vai mudar completamente. Aí os caras vão começar a mandar reforço, vão começar a te perseguir e tudo mais. E se tu conseguir escapar, gradualmente a segurança vai se dissipando.
The last thing I wanted to go into on the law
as prisões, ó.
Prisons, and they're going to effectively serve as additional deterrent to committing crimes within lawful areas. And I can't go into too much detail here since we're still working out the details of exactly what type of gameplay you'd experience while confined. And I'm sure we'll start out, fairly modestly and then gradually ramp up the ambition. We definitely want to have some interesting characters and missions within the prisons.
O cara vai poder ficar preso durante tempo para pagar o tempo que tu ficar preso. Tu pode pagar para sair, obviamente.
That are captured or killed would be immediately transported to prison, and the duration of their sentence would depend upon the number and severity of offenses.
Imagina o cara ter que ficar tempo sem jogar.
We're also going to wind up
provavelmente vai ter algum gameplay para te diminuir o tempo de sentença.
It's easy to basically steal these, enormously expensive, ships that represent a tremendous store of value.
Agora falando, se eu fico 5 minutos preso aqui de cama, eu já fico louco.
A security pad that would either require a significant amount of time or some hacking skill for you to bypass, or a physical key that resides on your body, which basically means
dá para te escapar da prisão. Ele está comentando, tu pode hackear o sistema ou usar implantes no corpo para tentar escapar.
We're also going to make it substantially more difficult for you to fly these stolen ships throughout the system, and by that I mean players with stolen ships are going to become much less able to frequent a bunch of the shops that provide refueling repair services. So they're therefore going to have to head out to the criminal areas, the lawless areas, in order to take care of a lot of those types of
Para o cara poder pilotar uma nave roubada, ele provavelmente vai ter que reabastecer e fazer reparos em áreas onde não tem monitoramento. Porque senão ele não consegue nem pousar, né?
After talking so much about the law and order system, I think it probably only makes sense to give you guys a little bit of a sense as to where we're headed with bounty hunting. One of the first few things you're going to notice once the dynamic mission system starts to come online will be the directed NPC bounty hunters. And I spoke about this a bit earlier in the dynamic mission system section. But these bounty hunters won't be dependent upon a probability volume to spawn them, and their capabilities and frequency are going to increase as the price on your head grows. Many jurisdictions will have a resident bounty hunting guild, and there are a lot of benefits to registration. There are also going to be some costs. Some will require a certain level of reputation in order for you to join. Some will require a recurring membership fee, and others may
aos caçadores de
require
recompensas, tu
you
precisa ter uma reputação mínima.
Maintain a certain quota
E
of
os
bounties.
NPCs, eles vão spawnar de forma aleatória para te caçar. E à medida que a tua reputação como criminoso ia aumentando, mais NPCs vão aparecendo para começar a tentar pegar o teu bônus.
Their last known position and ship. And this information is updated in real time so that once you're registered as a bounty hunter, anything that detects the presence of a known felon within that area will be automatically broadcast to you. And this all kind of goes towards, in the direction of making life more difficult for people that are going out and committing these crimes.
O cara vai precisar se registrar, o cara vai ter que ter reputação mínima, pagar como se fosse uma taxa para ser bounty hunting. One of the nicer aspects of the new system is basically that it's going to eliminate the need to manually accept individual bounties. Now you're just going to automatically be registered. You're going to automatically have knowledge of any bounties that are agora, interessante, ó, no futuro, tu não vai precisar aceitar a missão de bounty hunting. Se tu já for registrado como um caçador de recompensas, as missões elas vão aparecer de forma automática. Que nem no Elite Dangerous, né? Se tu passar por algum cara que está sendo procurado, tu pode abater ele na hora ali sem precisar ter que aceitar a missão. No Star Citizen agora tu tem que aceitar, né? Para poder caçar alguém. Os caras vão poder rastrear o Quantum Drive do cara com equipamentos adequados.
So the quality of the bounty, the quality of the tracking equipment and the size of the ship is going to dictate how long this trail can be detected. So you'll need to be fairly close on the heels of your prey if you want to have a chance at actually following. Another change that will involve what we're calling virtuals, again, spoofed NPC bounties. And this is similar to the ghost concept that I mentioned before, except in this particular case, the spoofed NPCs are your targets. And so you can think of it as you're registered as a bounty hunter. Of course, you'll be tracking the players, but we're also going to have a lot of NPCs, that we don't want to truly have driving around, flying ships, doing all of this expensive stuff unless there's a player to see them. And so you can think of them as just little point-like like entities that can move from location to location, occasionally tripping the security alarm so that you can actually follow them. And they'll generate everything just as a player would in terms of they'd go to a system, then you may wind up seeing them trip a facial ID camera at a particular area. And if you get there quickly enough, there would actually be a good chance that they'd be in that location. If it turns out that they're not in that area, then you may see a quantum trail that's been left by this little virtual entity.
Legal que vai dar para te rastrear o cara pelo Quantum Drive.
Truly hunting people.
As recompensas.
So right now, as soon as you kill someone with a bounty on your head, you get paid. This is going to change so that payment is withheld until you've delivered proof of death to the appropriate security office. Capture bounties are going to work similarly, but with one key difference. If an NPC
Seja bem-vindo, Next Abdal. Valeu pelo follow.
With the idea being that you'd take them to the designated prison, at which point you'd be paid.
Tu pode capturar os players e NPCs e levar eles para a prisão.
If another player captured you to basically sit on their ship for who knows how long, and there's no guarantee that they'd take you straight to
Se
prison.
tu matar procurado, tu vai ter que dar provas que tu matou realmente ele.
Player, at that moment, they're simply teleported to prison. You wind up getting a proxy NPC to fill their place. That proxy NPC will behave just like a normal NPC that you captured, and you march them back to go collect your money. Bounty hunters won't, of course, be simply confined to space. There will be FPS bounty hunters, both players and NPCs wandering around the cities. And so every time, if you're actually moving through a city, you've got a price on your head, and people start, coming up to you and basically, focusing on you a little bit too long. It may be a sign that they're actually running your ID, and they may be.
Mas se o cara estiver andando na cidade e ele for procurado, os players podem achar o cara e abater ele, hein?
Also wanted to talk a little bit about salvage. Salvage revolves around the extraction of bits of value from a ship. And there are three distinct methods of salvage. The first one is component extraction.
Estão falando agora sobre sucata.
This may require bypassing a security system to gain access to the module or cutting the items from their fixed housings. These components will often be small enough to be carried, and thus significant value, power generators, shield generators, batteries, and things of that sort can be gleaned from these ships with enough trips. Data extraction involves transferring electronic data
coleta de sucata ela vai estar dividido principalmente em três tipos de extração. Extração de componentes, né? Tu vai poder, por exemplo, ir dentro da nave que está destruída. Tu vai ter que cortar os componentes que estão grudados na nave, né, para poder extrair eles. E esses componentes geralmente eles são pequenos o suficiente para te conseguir carregar, né, como geradores de força, de escudo, baterias e tudo mais. Tu pode extrair data da nave, mesmo esquema, tu vai precisar de criptografar os itens e levar ele na tua nave. E também tu pode extrair o casco da nave, né, para vender a matéria-prima dele.
It's from a couple years ago, just to kind of illustrate the concept. And basically, this is just the damage texture, which is very, the same basic tech that we're going to use to extract it. So you could think of it as salvage. Salvage for the hull scraping would be equivalent to this combined with the mining arm and tractor beam that you see in mining right now.
Aí falando que o método de extrair o casco pode ser praticamente muito parecido com o método de dano. Aí é só trocar a arma por laser como o da mineração, por exemplo.
Touch on today is actually discovery.
Olha só o sistema de descoberta.
This is one of my favorite occupations and involves the acquisition of what I would call locational information. These packets of information can be procured via various methods. They can be actively sought out via scanning.
Tu vai poder vender itens de descoberta através de escaneamento, né? Através de análise também e também por acaso.
Obtained by chance. You might simply be flying around in deep space and come upon a previously undiscovered asteroid field. Perhaps that's what pulled you out of your quantum travel. You can also engage in analysis, say for example by inspecting a parcel of land up close and personal so that you attain a level of certainty you wouldn't be able to achieve from a long-range scan. And so you can think of discovery in some sense as the grease that allows other occupations to function and or focus.
Não, acho que não tem como rebocar as naves, só tem como desmontar elas. De repente, tu possa até consertar ela a ponto de fazer ela funcionar de novo, levando os componentes que faltam.
And there are a lot of different types of locational information. And some of those allow for successive deeper layers of discovery, sometimes increasing the value dramatically and other times rendering the find
tem diferentes tipos de localização de informação de locais, ó.
That was found via a long-range scan.
Pode localizar detritos ou naves, por exemplo, o tipo da nave, o que ela estava carregando, qual era a sua função.
The type of the ship and its current state, whether it had already been stripped down, in which case it would have no value, whether it was operational, in which case the value would be worth quite a bit more. Similarly, the discovery of a previously unknown asteroid field or comet wouldn't
descobrir cinturões de asteroides ou cometas, quantidade de recursos que pode estar presente no local, itens que podem ser mineráveis.
And close inspection of a parcel enough to verify that
seja bem-vindo, Paulo. Valeu pelo follow, cara. O cara pode encontrar produtos e analisar a flora. Pode encontrar buracos negros também, bases piratas, geysers para análise de cientistas. E eu não consegui analisar o último item ali.
And these packets of information that you collect are stored within a dedicated MobiGlass application and allow you to share that information with other players and organizations. And it's important to note that the value of information degrades over time.
Aí tu consegue coletar esses itens através do aplicativo especial do MobiGlass.
A rich deposit of gold on the surface
para poder compartilhar essas informações com jogadores, organizações, outros jogadores ou bases de informação, né?
If on the other hand you sat on it for a week or 2 weeks, at that point it's not worth very much at all because you don't know whether or not that gold has since been extracted, whether it's actually still there. So you can periodically go back and refresh your knowledge, travel to location and verify.
E os information brokers, eles servem para trading hubs, eles servem para comprar e vender informações e também eles servem como missões, né?
One of the primary ways by which players that engage in discovery will actually make money. They'll buy and sell based upon the current market value, which will be again dictated by supply and demand. So if the price of aluminum is in the tank,
cara, vai ser massa, por exemplo, tu achar cinturão de asteroides, tu vai fazer a análise e vai descobrir o quanto de recursos tem ali, e aí tu vai poder decidir se tu quer ou não vender para algum player diretamente, ou se tu vai querer vender para esses caras. Aí esses caras vão revender para outros jogadores. Tu como jogador, tu pode chegar no information broker e comprar, por exemplo, a localização de um asteroide para minerar.
Say again? Wow, I thought it went long. Well, what we could do is we could basically, so what we have right here is Jake Mealy and Rob Reininger, two of the Austin designers. As I mentioned earlier, Mealy is practically single-handedly responsible for all of the vast changes and
Sistema de Economia tá foda, hein?
Efficient,
eu gostei.
Algorithmic content that's being layered onto the pricing models that we're utilizing. And so these guys could answer any questions in any level of detail that you may have in that area. Yeah, that's called payback.
The ultimate parry.
So if we do have a few minutes, we could answer a few questions.
O que a gente tem agora?
Sure.
Que engraçado que no meu esquema aqui não parecia que ia ser economia que ia dar agora.
I would lean towards thinking that it's probably just constant time, but
depois vamos continuar nesse estágio aqui mesmo, né? Porque depois vem lawmakers.
Like I said, we'll like we do with a lot of things, we'll start out.
Fala, Rider Highway, como é que tá, cara? Tô tranquilo?
Relatively minimalistically, and then we'll gradually expand out. Some of the bigger questions that we're facing in terms of the prison stuff is how do we make it fun? Exactly what type of gameplay are you engaging there? Because it really really is, it's a confined space. And we know that we want to have the potential to meet interesting characters. It'd be almost like if you go back, a year and a half ago to where we had Area 18, and you were confined to that space. And so imagine that space, and you've got, you've got gangs in there, and you can actually, associate yourself with one of them, and that relationship translates to, when you actually get released to the outside. And there would, of course, be the potential to actually escape from prison. And so there's a lot of potential that would really just be doing the same stuff that we're doing in a lot of other places. I mean, you build up, a personal reputation with other characters within the game already. This one is, again,
Cara, o sistema de economia tá bem legal, meu.
We don't expect the average player to be getting locked away for long periods of time because we don't expect the average player to be committing, lots of crimes in secure zones. And sure.
That's for the NPC technology. Would that be helpful for, I guess, in two specific cases, in the on-merchant seller?
Por que não dá um microfone pro tiozinho lá, meu? Me diz.
So you're talking about whether if you had like a price on your head and you're basically moving into.
If you're selling goods as a on-merchant owner, that if you land on a planet, that the NPCs just start to hear that there's a merchant.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's basically exactly. It's like so. What you would wind up having is these probability volumes that I mentioned, earlier. They effectively, give us a mathematical description of what you would potentially see. And like I said, so we are actually, or we will be, simulating these things, in more precise detail, like these little point entities. But once we get over to the game side, what we don't want to wind up doing is having to compare, for example, the location of an individual ship with
Valeu, Hardway. Como é que tá, cara? Tudo tranquilo, hein?
And trying to like, infer stuff there. And so the probability volumes are really a pre-processing step that's performed in real time that takes this background information and makes it easily digestible for the game. So that, for example,
makers depois.
For quite a while within the game already, to where every time you jump,
depois a gente vai ter
what we're
negócios
basically doing
NPCs.
is casting your path through the universe and plotting your course through all these probability volumes and figuring out where you would actually, run into a particular entity. And this is all dictated right now, like I said, specifically by the designers going in and hand setting this stuff. And so the next step is basically hooking that stuff up to the economy so that we can start to feed real-time information to these volumes so that the quantity of pirates, it ebbs and flows based upon what's actually happening. Sure.
With regards to the salvage mechanic, you mentioned that you at some point in time, you would be able to get possibly components off some of these salvage ships. Do you foresee the ability to get military grade, certain components of military grade is the first question, and thereby being able to update your own ships by interchanging some of the salvage components? And then will there also be the opportunity, you kind of touched on it, but will there be the opportunity to salvage nearly fully operational ships that are, through some?
Yeah, well, the opposite of salvage, of course, is repair, and so it's very possible you disable another player, you take out their engines, you take out the crew. Well, now you need to repair the engines before you can go on your way. Or you find a derelict ship, and you basically perform enough repairs. You repair its hull, you basically replace its its batteries, you give it a new power module, etc. And now it actually becomes operational again. And one of the reasons I should just point out, one of the reasons why component extraction is so high on the list is because it allows us to let players extract a significant amount of value before we actually have to deal with the complicated issues. Like, imagine you have an Idris and you've got these big, enormous, batteries, and you want to actually extract that entire thing. Well, that just becomes, a user interface and logistical nightmare. Whereas components, these nice little, small, easily, carryable things, it's a very simple way for us to allow you to go onto a ship, bypass the security systems, cut off these things, and extract maybe not all, but significant chunks of the value in this manner. Data is the same way. So you can have ships that basically have the location stored on them, just like I was mentioning on Discovery. You can have a ship that has within its database that you can extract, that you can salvage. the location of a comment. Now you go verify the comment and actually see what its current state is. The hole scraping is just another way to basically pull a good chunk of the value of its hole plating and stuff off. And so the reason why those three are at the top of the list is they're the most straightforward and quickest ones to implement, and we want to get the basics of some of these things running as quickly as possible so that we can start to iterate on them and basically broaden the number of things that players can do within the game. All the best.
With the discovery location data, do those locations exist temporarily as long as the player has the data? Or are these locations that are permanently, like the new places to explore, discover, people to come back?
Yeah, they're actually dynamically created, but as long as you retain knowledge of them, they would basically continue to exist. In other words, I'm flying, from point A to point B, or I'm doing a scan, and I actually locate, a new asteroid field. That asteroid field wasn't necessarily, always there. It was created, randomly. But now that you know about it, and you can think about this logically as being. These things wouldn't be static in the real world, right? These things are moving. So once you find it, well, I know where it's at as long as I keep pretty close, tabs on it. But if I ever just forget about it entirely, you know what? There's asteroids coming and going through the solar system, moving around, all the time. It's like there's no certainty that you're ever really going to be able to find it. Plus, there's always the question mark of, did another NPC, or player find it that you don't know about? Basically, mine it into nothingness. And so there are a lot of reasons why this thing may eventually not be there. But as long as you retain knowledge, as long as you go back and periodically refresh it, then you can keep it, in perpetuity.
Tony, Chris mentioned it a little bit in the opening statement about survival play. I know we've talked about this a lot over the years, but what's the current state of thought in that? Say you get shot down and no comm equipment on a moon or a planet,
Well, that actually plays right into that dynamic mission system and and the probability volumes that I was mentioning before, to where, in essence, what you'd wind up doing, you get shot down over a moon, and what you do right now is you basically fire up your service beacon and you basically set it to 100 credits, and basically you ask somebody for help. The problem is that if you're off in some distant moon or whatever the case may be, there may not be a player around you, or maybe the players that are on the same server as you are too far away, or maybe they're engaged in their own missions. And so what we want to do, is basically allow NPCs to start to participate. And so if you're on that moon and you need transport, and you basically throw that request for assistance out there, and no players assist, what the dynamic mission system would then do is query all of the nearby probability volumes and determine whether or not any NPCs would actually be interested in helping you. And that would depend largely upon, again, what they're doing. It's like, maybe your price is too low, so you're not interested in them. But if you get the price to the right point, you will eventually pull one of those guys in there. And this, again, it's a capability we don't have right now because there's no easy or effective way for the designers to tap into it, and that's why we've got a lot riding on this thing, and we're so anxious.
Depois de ter falado a tarde toda, um cafezinho quente é bom. Maldito.
Yeah. Well, we've got thirst and hunger is actually on, one of the things on the list that we've got slated to deal with next year, and this would be the same thing for for all the NPCs, to where you'll actually start to get you'll need to basically you'll need to basically drink, you'll need to eat, you'll need to do all of that, or else because we don't want to make it too annoying, start to suffer various deleterious effects.
Question about simulated NPCs.
Aí ele comentou que ano que vem vai entrar sistema de fome e sede, hein? Não só pro player, mas também como pro NPC.
At any given time, the spoof ones are actually going to be fairly minimal because they're not really created except as necessary. In other words, most of the time. So the eventual idea is to be simulating 10 or 20 million
Só tem uma nave para minerar por enquanto, Vegadar, que é a Prospector. Tá, acho que $200 e poucos, acho. Lembrando que na 3.3.5 vai dar para comprar ela, hein?
It's not as if these simulated NPCs change their occupation on a second by second basis or anything like that. And so what you wind up having is a big repository of these characters that periodically reevaluate and decide, do I want to keep working at this factory, or is there something more attractive? Well, if I leave the factory and I decide to become a miner, what am I actually doing? Oh, well, if he's doing a miner, then all of a sudden there's a demand for more fuel in that area. And if he's not working at the factory, that means all of a sudden that the rates for factory workers, you've got one less NPC that will actually be available to supply that, which means the cost of things that depend upon labor, in general would go up. I mean, one NPC would never really matter.
Mendes comentando ali.
But, you get the point.
Você acha que Star Citizen não é um jogo para piar? Cara, com certeza. Só por ele ser pago em dólar já é uma coisa que muda muito aí o público. Mas devido ao seu realismo e tudo mais que ele apresenta, com certeza o público que joga Star Citizen é um público mais velho. Tanto que no Analytics do meu YouTube, o meu principal público é o pessoal de 25 a 35 anos. Depois vem o de 18 a 25. E em terceiro lugar, acredite se quiserem, é de 50 para cima. Quer dizer, tem muito cara de 50 anos pra cima que também joga Star Citizen. Não digo que ele não seja pra piata, mas sim, o público-alvo do Star Citizen é com certeza o pessoal mais velho.
Elements, etc., that we can basically, create at will to basically, fill up the populace. And the other interesting thing is we can kind of bend that, however we.
Calma, Dizel, daqui a pouco vai ter.
You've got a mining colony, and therefore there's a lot of blue-collar workers, and there's not much in the way of advanced, production capabilities or anything like that. And all of a sudden, the asteroid field that's near that area winds up getting depleted. Then all of a sudden, there's very little ore being brought in and being utilized, etc. And so what you would logically expect is lower per capita income, less employment, more crime, and what you wind up seeing over time would therefore be more of these simulated NPCs shifting their occupation from blue-collar worker to criminal.
Mas o grande problema dos players dessa geração é que os games eles estão muito mais fáceis do que antigamente, né? Então se criou uma cultura de que ele facilita o cara continuar no game para ele ficar mais e mais horas, entendeu? Lembra que antigamente tu passar um jogo era uma coisa muito complicada, não era para qualquer um. É só tu pegar, por exemplo, o Dark Souls, vai ver que o público dele ele é muito menor que qualquer outro jogo. Porque o Dark Souls ele segue uma vertente muito mais hardcore que outros. Só que o ponto negativo disso é que quando tu cria um nicho de games como tipo os games só joga player hardcore, tu diminui muito o público. Mas só que tem um ponto positivo nessa geração de games, cara, que é que gamers casuais que não jogavam antes, cara, eles passaram a jogar agora. Então, quer dizer, tem seu ponto positivo e tem seu ponto negativo. A grande questão é mercado. Qual é o mercado que cada jogo segue, entendeu? Star Citizen, sim, ele é um jogo pra cara que é um gamer um pouco mais assíduo do que o cara que é casual.
It's incredibly wasteful, and then you think about, well, you can have lots of players with lots of ships, with lots of extra crew, and so everywhere we're always thinking about ways.
Olha, eu falando que Dark Souls é fichinha para ter conta. Cara, acho que bater todos era mais difícil que contra.
Where we're looking for ways to optimize so that we're getting all of the beneficial end effects, maybe in some cases even more, like I mentioned earlier, without with all of the rampant waste that would come from just blindly doing some of this stuff. And so to your question,
tá falhando aqui a transmissão dos caras lá?
That we're
Acho que, não, é o microfone dele.
One of the things we've been looking at is basically a couple of different levels of basically tapping down on the MPC functionality so that you would still get all of the behavioral benefits.
Ô meu, tô desde os 14 aqui.
Engineering section, he would still repair things at the rate of speed that he normally would. He could still be injured if there was damage.
Porque o microfone dele tá errado lá, mas acho que é por isso.
To basically turn off some of those high fidelity, animations, pathfinds, stuff like that are really only a benefit of the players there. As long as they perform as they would if you were watching them, in another way, there's no reason to do all.
Não é que o FPS do Star Citizen seria voltado para um público mais jovem, Hardway. Não tem, porque assim, o FPS dele não vai ser que nem um COD da vida. Ele vai ser muito mais voltado para um arma do que para um Battlefield, por exemplo. É muito técnico o FPS do game. Então, isso com certeza já mostra que o FPS vai ser para o pessoal mais velho também.
Thank you for attending By Design.